Hey guys, we just released our new premium course and I'm super happy about it, and I'm so happy that we even had a stream with a bonus chapter that's going to be available right here for you. So make sure to enjoy this free chapter, and if you like it, make sure to check the link down here in the description so that you can get access to the full course in Udemy. Thank you very much, my friends. Enjoy. So, today I wanted to talk about what's the word? The project that we released not too long ago, actually today, it just released today. And we're going to be doing a very, very cool adaptation of this thing. We're going to be doing a new render so that we can showcase some of the tools and the elements that we're going to be doing inside of the, inside of the course. Oop, let me bring this over here. There we go. Perfect. So feel free to jump into chat if you guys are watching and ask any question, because we're gonna be taking this along for a ride. Oh, actually, now that I see this, I can't have the chat here. It seems like I can't have the chat because when I click on this window, it just goes away. I'm gonna have to find a way to do that later. So I'm sorry if the chat's not available, but I'm still reading every single thing that you guys are writing. So I'm gonna keep my chat here to the side. There we go. So let's go to perspective view here, and this is the render that we do during the course. This is like the main render, but I was thinking about doing something slightly different. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna save file, and I'm gonna save this as, let's call this alternate cinematic. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna delete a lot of the things that we have right here to pretty much start from scratch to get an idea of how I want things to be set up, and then we'll be doing some modeling and some sculpting. So yeah, just making sure that everything is working over here. Seems like it. There we go. Cool. So let me jump to material preview here so that we can see the actual materials without having any sort of information. And whenever we see weapons, I think, especially when you're presenting weapons, one of the things that you need to try to do is you need to try to present them in the context of where you're going to be seeing them on a game, on a film, on a commercial, like whatever, right? And one of the things that I was thinking about was an anvil. So you guys know that usually weapons will be like that they're going to be forged on an anvil or something. But in this case, I was thinking that it would be cool, especially since this thing has this like glowy effect. Look at that. I haven't animated here the glowy effect. It would be cool if this thing was actually encrusted into the into the actual object, right? We got Rincha. Welcome, my friend. Welcome to the stream. So one thing that I want to do here is I want to change the pivot point of the object, because as you can see, the pivot point right now is on the hook right here, and that's not actually very easy to manage. So I'm gonna go to the properties, and what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna delete all of the animation. So I don't want to have any sort of animation on my element, and then this guy's right here. Let's zero out all of the rotations. So this is the usual state of my axe. This is, by the way, this is a game ready axe. This has been properly optimized. If we go to the wireframe, you're gonna see that we have very few polygons compared to what you would see on a high poly. I think we were at 16,000 or something like that. So so it's pretty optimized. Someone was asking me to preview this inside of Unreal, which I think it's a really good idea. We might be doing that later on. So here, what I'm gonna do is I am first of all, as I mentioned, I'm gonna change the position of the pivot point. The pivot point right now is set up in a very weird area. Again, it's down here. So what I want to do is I need to move my 3D cursor, and I'm gonna move my 3D cursor to a point that's easy to find. So I'm gonna press number 3. I'm gonna press Shift and right click, and I'm gonna position my 3D cursor right there. Let's go to layout mode, by the way. There's no need for us to be in shading mode. Let's delete this cube. There we go. So as you can see, shift and right click to position this on the approximate place where someone would grab the axe. And then I grab the object and I'm going to say object, set origin, origin to 3D cursor. So now as you can see, the origin is right there. The only thing I don't like about that is that it's not like on the center. I'm gonna turn on increment snap to with absolute grid snap, and I'm gonna press shift and click to get it right there. Now, again, we go to object, set origin, and origin to 3D cursor. And that way, oh my God, why did it do that? Let's go wireframe. Let's move the cursor. Is it snapping to? It's really weird. Let me like just turn it off. I'm gonna snap the 3D cursor right there on both views. There we go. And then now that we know that it's exactly where we want, we just go object, set origin, and origin to 3D cursor. There we go. So now when we move the axe, as you can see, when we like move it or when we rotate it, it's gonna rotate from a more like expected place. So I'm gonna go online real quick and let's get ourselves a picture of an anvil, okay? So we're gonna go over here and we're gonna look for an anvil. And we're gonna be modeling one of this. Now, I'm not sure if I wanna go like super old school like this guy's right here, or if we wanna do something a little bit newer. What do you guys think? Should we go with something like this, for instance? This one looks quite cool. Let's look for anvil dwarven. I'm a huge fan of dwarves in fantasy, so ooh, something like that looks really, really nice. It's a little bit more decorated, but I think it looks very cool. Yeah, it looks like anvils are very like standard, so I'm probably gonna have to go with this one right here, this Canadian Forge one. So let's download this image, and we're gonna download this on our desktop for now. We're gonna go to the side view, and I'm gonna press Shift A, image, and we're gonna bring in a reference image. And if we go to our desktop, we're gonna be bringing this one right here. Perfect. So the size really doesn't matter right now. We can adjust that later on. I'm gonna turn off the blade for now so that we can focus on the anvil. And once we have the anvil ready, we'll just bring the axe and we'll start playing with the lights and everything. By the way, if you guys haven't seen the final render that we have, this is the final render. This is the course that I just finished. Is the first course that we're gonna be releasing under this new brand. And yeah, the course is ready. If you guys want to check it out, we'll leave the links somewhere here in the description in just a second. But yeah, that course is available through Udemy, so you can check that one. Let's go mesh, and let's start with a cube. I'm gonna scale this down and get this right around there so that we match the initial shape. And then I'm gonna grab this face right here, and I'm just gonna extrude this all the way to the back until we hit like the back part right there. We can constrain this to the y-axis to make sure that it's perfectly flat. Ooh. G and Y. G and Y. There we go. I'm gonna go to wireframe mode, and there's a lot of ways in which we can like handle this curvature right here. If we want to keep it simple, probably the easiest way is to add some loops going from top to bottom and just like capturing that curvature right there, which is what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna add one right there, and let's add two more right there. If we go now to vertex mode, we can select this guy right here and just G and push it up, G, push it up, G, push it up, and G and push it up. There we go. So with this one, I'm gonna just press this element right here. I'm gonna grab these 2 points, a G and Y, to push them back, and that's gonna give me the initial construction of the anvil. Now what we need to do, of course, is to create the base of the anvil. So I'm gonna go back here, and as you can see, we got this curvature. So topology or the flow of polygons is very important, especially if we're going to be dealing with game assets where we want to really optimize things. So in this particular case, one of the things that we might want to have is a nice curvature flowing down. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that everything again flows in the nicest possible way. So I'm going to add one line right here, one like insertion, one loop. Let's push this back so we can see the underside. And if we go to face mode, we can select this face, this face right here and this one right here, and we're gonna extrude this down. Okay, so by doing this extrusion, as you can see, we've successfully created an edge loop that flows nicely with the anvil. However, as some of you might be already visualizing, it looks very weird because we are not like really capturing the curvature. So here is again where we can add some edge loops. I'm gonna add 3, go to vertex mode, grab this vertex, and with G and Y start pushing them so that we can get the actual curvature of our object closer to that. I'm gonna grab all of this guys right here. I'm gonna say G and Y again, and just push this in. Now you can see it's slightly asymmetrical. I think I personally want to keep it symmetrical. So I'm gonna push this a little bit more, even if we're not matching the concept as much. I just wanna have like something that looks a little bit closer to the actual anvil. And I would expect this thing to become narrower as well on the side view. So I'm gonna go, or on the front view. So I'm gonna go to front view, grab all of this guys, S and X to narrow this down, and S and X to narrow this one down as well. And as you can see, we captured that very, very nice curvature there for the anvil. Now we have another like a big question, like how are we gonna create this thing when the object that we're using right now is a very, let's say, square object, right? It's very polygonal. And the reason why we are going to be doing this, or the way we're going to be doing this rather, is we're going to be using a secondary shape, because all of this anvil, we're actually going to go through sculpting. We're going to be adding some sculpting effects. We got a question from Burhanuddin that says, hello my friends, welcome. Why am I not doing lives on YouTube? Because YouTube doesn't have as many tools for streamers, to be honest. So we got a lot of cool things here inside of Twitch that I really like, and yeah, we're just trying our luck. So now I'm gonna do Shift A, and we're gonna add a cone. Actually, I'm gonna show you a trick. It's a very cool trick. I'm gonna go with a cube. You might be wondering, why are we doing a cube if this thing is very like rounded? Well, because as you can see, even though it's very rounded, on the very border of this thing, we actually have a sort of like square effect. So we go from round to square. I'm gonna grab this face right here. We did G. I'm gonna bring it all the way to the top, and I'm gonna scale it down so that we have a very thin tip. Then I'm gonna add some loop cuts. So let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, and with my vertex mode, I'm just gonna start pushing them down. So G, 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 and G. This one as well, probably right around there. G. Cool. So I definitely need to check my reference a little bit more, because I'm a little bit. Oh, there we go. So as you can see, this thing is usually very square, and it goes into this whole like pointy horn. So I'm gonna go to face mode. I'm gonna grab all of those faces, and I'm gonna do something called an extrusion along normals, which is gonna extrude them in the exact same direction that they are, so we can get this sort of effect. I know we're going a little bit out of this concept, but I really like this sort of like effect that we have right there. So I want to try to capture a little bit of that. And that's one of the cool things about 3D. Like you can play around with different elements and generate slightly like different results. Whoa. So the artistic freedom is always a fun thing to do. This model is an anvil, Burhanuddin. We're gonna be doing this what's the word? This model to support the model that we did for our newest course, which is this one right here, this axe. So I want to do an interesting shot where the axe is kind of like embedded into the anvil, you know, like this red hot axe being like just positioned right there. We're gonna play with that a little bit later in the stream, so make sure to stay here. Now I'm gonna go over here, and one of the things that I want to do is I'm gonna grab the edge loop, and I'm gonna grab this edge loop right here on the bottom part and the top part, but I want to deselect the ones that are going towards the square effect. So we're just gonna be using, or we're just gonna be selecting the ones on the spike, and then we're gonna bevel. This of course will generate some what's the word? It will definitely generate some angons, but angons are not bad. That's a very common like misconception. People think that angons are like the end of the world. They're not, but we need to be very mindful of how and where we use them. So in this case, I'm gonna just do that real quick. And then all of this vertex right here, I'm gonna press M, and I'm gonna collapse at center. So now that's a single point right there. And if we were to add a subdivision surface to this thing, we would get a very nice effect. We got Daniel68. Thanks for the sub, my friend. Thank you very much. So now let's go to this lower part right here. And the way that works, as you can see, is it kind of like flows down, it like flares out, and then we have this holes right here. So I'm gonna go to my faces again, grab this face and this face, extrude this down to get my like the height of the elements, and then grab all of these elements, like all of these faces, and again with extrude region, we're gonna extrude these guys out. And as you can see, that's going to give us the sort of like base of the anvil, so that we can now cut those holes right there. So as you can see, we get something that looks really, really close. This is not the final piece, but we're already capturing like the silhouette very, very nicely. So now I need to do this cuts right here. And there's a lot of ways to do it, but I want to show you the following. First, I'm actually going to like separate the spike from the anvil. So I'm just going to select all of the linked faces with the letter L. And then I'm going to hit P, which is separate, and I'm going to separate the selection. So now we have two objects. If I go to this object now, we can go to the modifiers, and if we add a bevel modifier, what we're going to do is we're going to be beveling pretty much every single element or every single like line. We can change the amount of the bevel, and we can change the segments of the bevel. I'm going to do 2 bevels, and there we go, and I'm going to hit apply. And then I'm going to apply a subdivision surface modifier, which is going to, like, it should smooth everything here on our element. We are getting some weird effects right there. Don't worry about this. Again, we're going to go into sculpting mode, so all of those like weird artifacts are going to be like solved. That's some like shading stuff. Now that we have this shape again with some like interesting effects, the next thing that we can do is we can do some booleans. So if we go back to the object here, you're going to see that this thing is pretty much like a cylinder. So I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to add a cylinder into my scene. And I'm going to just bring it to the side. I'm going to grab this guy right here, add a new modifier, and we're going to be using a Boolean modifier. And the object that we're going to be Booleaning from is, of course, the cylinder. So if I get the cylinder close to the element, and if we go to wireframe mode, you're going to see that this cylinder is eating away from the element right there. One of the things that I like to do with Booleans is a very cool tip, is to go into the actual object display, object properties, and here on visibility, you can change the viewport display and display this as a wireframe. So now it's a wireframe, and that's a lot easier to know where you're cutting something. So I'm gonna obviously scale this in. There we go. And that's gonna be giving me that sort of cut that we have right there. So once I'm happy, one of the things that I can do is I can go back to the booleans of this guy right here and just say apply. That's gonna apply the boolean. We don't need the cylinder anymore. And to get the exact same effect right here on the other side, I'm just gonna grab this guy and say add modifier, and we're gonna do a mirror modifier. This mirror modifier is gonna, one thing we need to do first. We need to Control A to apply all transforms. Now we do a mirror modifier, and the mirror modifier should be giving me this one. I'm gonna select the bisect so that we get one side of the element like moved to the other side. We got a message from Daniel that says, always with the good content, this deserves more. Thank you, my friend. Thank you. It's been some very, very cool first weeks. We're just launching the brand, so we got our Discord channel, our YouTube channel. We're uploading stuff everywhere so that people can see what we're doing. But as with everything, it's a slow ramp up, right? So I appreciate every single part of the support. Thank you very much for that. So now that we have this, again, I'm gonna apply the mirror. And now we can actually go into sculpting mode. So let me very quickly set up my tablet here so that we can do a little bit of sculpting. Give me just 1 second. There we go. Where's my pen? There we go. So I'm using, I get this question frequently, like what tablet should I use? What should I buy? I'm using a Huion pen display, and it's been really, really good. I've been using it for the past like year and a half or something. I got it like last January, I think. Not 2023, 2022. And it's been really good. So if you guys have been debating whether or not to get a pen display, it's really, really worth it. It's really cool. And you do get some cool stuff. So I'm going to go to sculpting mode here. And I'm going to turn off the spike for now so that we can focus on the anvil. I'm going to give it a little bit of a stylized look. And I'm going to get rid of all of these lines right here. So sculpting is really interesting because sculpting allows us to add way, way, way more detail than what you might expect from your objects. And by doing this, we can generate like a lot, like assets that look way, way better. So here, what I'm going to do is I am going to press R to set my resolution for my remeshing options that we're going to be doing. Remeshing, if you guys are familiar with ZBrush, is pretty much like Dynamesh. So I'm going to set this to, let's say, 0.2. There we go. And then if I press Control R, what's going to happen is the whole object is going to be remeshed. And as you can see, the topology just changed. And now instead of having the clean topology that I used to have, now I have this very like dirty topology. But again, it's going to be what we need. So I'm going to press Symmetry on X so that we can work on both sides. And as you can see, very easy. We just start smoothing. I'm just going to start smoothing all of these lines that we got from the initial bevel. You can press F to make the brush bigger. And we're just going to smooth all of this out. We got symmetry turned on, so we just have to do it on one side. It's gonna, of course, save myself a lot of trouble. There we go. Let's increase the resolution a little bit more. So I'm gonna bring the R down to like 0.1. Control R. If you wanna see how many polygons you have, you can go over here and turn on statistics. And by doing this, as you can see, we're now able to visualize that we got almost 2,000 polygons, which is fine. Like for an asset like this one, it's perfectly fine. There we go. Now I'm going to be using one of my favorite tools, which is the, what's the word? The flatten tool, or this one, scrape tool. Let me open these things. There we go, the scrape tool. So the scrape tool is like the trim dynamic. I'm a huge fan of trim dynamic inside of ZBrush. And this one, it's a really good, really cool tool, as you can see here, to give us this sort of like hard surfacey beveled edge, pretty much on all of the corners. So I'm just going to start adding this sort of effect right here. Now you can see that there is a very interesting transition going from the anvil into this like little legs. We can actually sculpt this in. Sometimes if you have a hard time trying to model something, sculpting it and then retopologizing will give you a faster result, and it's pretty much the same thing. We got a question from Burhanuddin that says, I have a question. I modeled then after it looks like some scaling issues. I model then after it looks like some scaling issues and did not look good. What can it, guys? Okay, so if you're having issues matching the actual sizes of things, the best thing you can do is take a screenshot of your object, take it to Photoshop or any like drawing software, and then compare with lines to see like how close or how far away you are from the actual element. I'm gonna use my clay strips here, and I'm gonna create this like legs that we have right here. So I'm gonna start adding a little bit of volume, as you can see right there. Going up and then bridging this and blending it so that it goes towards the little legs that we have over here. There we go. I'm also gonna actually just fill in a little bit right there. I know it looks very ugly right now, but I just want to fill in the elements, and once I have a good resolution here, I can press Ctrl R to remesh, and then we can use again our scrape brush to start polishing and creating the very nice flow going towards the anvil. See that? You can press Shift to smooth things out. Let's make this a little bit smaller. And what I want to have here is I want to have a smooth transition that matches what we have in the concept, or on the reference image rather. This is not a concept. You can smooth all of that out. And it also gives this a little bit more for an organic look. We can also use the grab brush. So for instance, if I want to tighten up this curvature here, I can use the grab brush and just start like pushing and pulling the little edge right there to get a lot closer to the sort of effect that I want to have. I'm going to use my scrape brush. Here I'm going to take some artistic liberties to like flatten this, because it feels weird to just have this thing. There we go, that looks a lot better. And then over here on the front view, we also have like a leg. So I'm gonna use my clay tubes again, clay strips, and we're gonna be pushing this in. Again, feel free to ask anything, guys. I always try to answer your questions on the chat. If you have questions about this one, about the new course, about the other socials, I'm super happy to help you out. There we go. Cool. Now we go back to scrape. And let's sharpen these lines up so that it flows nicely into the anvil. And again, we're getting this sort of like asymmetrical look. I personally like asymmetry in 3D because it allows you to generate or to have some more interesting shapes. When things are all like perfect and symmetrical, it looks very fake. In the real world, It's very, very common that things are not perfect and not like super symmetrical. So I like to follow that sort of like a style. Let's use our grab brush again. And let's push up. Let's straighten the line there, the sharp line. And that's it. So now let's go again to our scrape brush. And we're going to be adding some like cuts to the borders. This is very sort of like World of Warcraft, League of Legends style where you have like very exaggerated bevels. And the axe kind of has that sort of style as well. It's a very, very famous style that has been used quite a bit for the past like decade. So we're just doing it as well here. For instance, here, I'm going to keep some corners like bevel, and some of the other corners, I'm going to keep them a little bit cleaner. So for instance, we can add a little bit of damage right around there, but then keep it clean and not have any damage until we hit, I don't know, like the corners, like up here and up here. You don't want, like from a design perspective, you don't want to have everything like super, super obvious every single time. There we go. Oh, it seems like we like scratched something down here. It's very important that we fix this sort of stuff, because otherwise, when we do bakes and things like that, we can get some issues. Let's make this smaller. And that could look like, that looks like damage to the anvil, which again gives us an interesting effect overall. One of the things that you want to try to control when you're doing sculpting is the lumpiness of things. Like, you don't want things to look lumpy. So if you start seeing that there are certain areas that look a little bit weird, make sure to fix them. Make sure to take the time to really like clean up those shapes. And by cleaning, I mean you can use a smooth. That's one option. You can use, again, the scrape brush. The flatten brush is also really good to kind of like, again, flatten certain things. So if I see that there are a couple of elements that are like out of line, like on this area right here, I could use the trim brush. Now see how we get like a really weird curvature right there? That's where the grab brush is really good, because we can use the grab brush to clean that curvature. Like, utilize the polygons in the curvature that we already have to save ourselves a lot of problems. Let's go with the scrape again. I'm just gonna like tighten up that border a little bit more, smooth it out. There we go. There we go. The BR thing, I can't show you anything right now. We're actually working on some prototypes on the studio. The next, for those of you that aren't aware, other than the teaching that I do, I also have a small studio, and we've been doing a lot of BR stuff this past couple of years. And one of our big clients is a very famous museum here in Mexico. It's called Museo del Desierto. It's a desert-themed museum in the middle of the desert. Well, it's not in the middle of the desert, it's in the middle of the city, but we're in a desertic climate over here. And we are doing a new, a new experience. The first one that we did was about the dinosaurs. The second one that we did was about the Ice Age. And the third one is actually going to be about the desert. So we're working on that right now. It's like this sort of like magical experience where you become some animals and you travel the desert. You learn about it. It has to be educational because we do this for a museum, as I mentioned. So that's what we're working on right now. But the thing is, those projects, I am more of a lead role. So I don't do a lot of assets. I'm just like supervising and making sure that the artists that are doing the assets do the best possible work. Sarn is asking, is your new Blender weapons course a good start for people? Yes. Actually, the newest, like this course right here. Oop, where's the axe? Let's go to layout real quick. So the course that we just released is this one right here. So I teach you guys how to do this weapon, and we do it from scratch, like from absolute zero. We even have a chapter 0 if you're just beginning your 3D journey and you want to refresh some of the basic principles of like the the Blender navigation, the shortcuts and everything. I show you how to do it to get to this point right here. So yeah, we go through modeling, sculpting, rendering, retopology, PBR texturing, game optimization. Like this axis only 16,000 polygons, I think. So it's really, really, really optimized for probably like a AAA game, like kind of like God of War or something like that. And we even have this option. Well, I animate this option where we turn off and on the glow. I show you how to do some really cool renders as well. So yeah, there's a lot of things you can learn on that course. This is the first course that I'm releasing. I've done several courses before, but this is the first one that I'm releasing under myself, under this new brand, Avliel. So if you guys want to support me and you want to support the channel and all of the things that we're doing, that course is a perfect way to do it. Let's add a little bit more clay buildup here. And now I'm gonna smooth this out and use the scrape brush to flatten this up. There we go. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Again, just like tighten up some of the edges right there. Let's do a grab brush. Just like clean that area right there. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all we have to do for this element. I think I want to like remove a little bit of volume here. Again, just to sort of like push the curvature of that part. But that's pretty much it. So now we have a couple of options, and you guys on the chat are gonna let me know which one should we do first. We can retopologize this guy and do the textures, or we can start looking at the render. We can start like preparing some lights for the render. The last thing that I want to do is this one right here. So I'm gonna press Alt and Q is the shortcut to select this one. I'm gonna press R and again bring the resolution down. And if we press Control R, as you can see, we also make this a sort of what's the word, like an active element. We can actually go to layout. This is very cool. We can go to layout and I can just push this in a little bit so that it touches the element. And if we Control J both of them and we go back to sculpting and we press Control R, they're now going to be merged together. So very quick way to merge all of these things together. Now, of course, if we want to like clean this up a little bit, I'm gonna go to some of these elements. For instance, this bottom part right here, just bevel it a little bit, and this spike right here that's supposed to be way rounder, literally as if I was a smith, I'm just gonna start like cleaning this up and making this a lot smoother. So we got one boat for render. Yeah, I like rendering. There we go. Let's just make this a little bit more. Kind of want to make it a little bit rounder. So I'm going to go again to grab brush. And we're going to push this to the sides. Right here. By the way, this whole thing, it's an extra chapter, a bonus chapter. And the chapter 1, like the chapter 0 that I was mentioning, it's actually free. So if you go to Udemy and you get the course, you can get chapter 0 for free. Just watch it, learn from me, see if you like it or not, and then you can get the full course, where we go over the whole elements, all of the weapon. Retopo and textures, it says we're Hannity. So we got 1 and 1. Who's gonna break the tie? Who's gonna break the tie to see where we go? Oh, we lost a little bit of the sharpness there. Let's go again to the grab brush. Let's just push this up a little bit. So you can get a really nice clean support right there. You can even see that we have like that like gray cut line right there. We can get it. If we go to the scrape brush, we can start like carving in a little bit there. And using the edges of this thing to indicate that there's a change in plane. See that? Daniel has a question, says, as a Maya user, should I use that course to get more knowledge or trying applying the asset to Maya? Oh, that's a great question. So the thing about the course is that we do include a little bit of the sculpting things, like all of these things that I'm doing right here. We go over them quite a bit. And unfortunately, Maya does not have good sculpting tools. Like it does have some of them, but it's not as good as Blender. And you might find it difficult if you want to recreate some of those elements. However, all of the principles that we talk about like UVs and retopology, all of those things you can definitely like use inside of Maya. Even some of the things that we do about modeling, you can use inside of Maya. But it's a little bit more of a Blender kind of tutorial. Still very, very cool information though. So like I myself, I'm a Maya user as well. I've been using Maya for over 10 years, 12 years. So actually more, 13 years. Maya was the first software that I started using. And so you can still get some really cool information. It's like the rendering section, all of those things apply perfectly well to the element. Oh, okay, yeah. So if you use ZBrush for sculpting, then my advice, if you're gonna get the course, would be to do the sculpting sections inside of ZBrush, and then retopology, UVs, and everything else inside of Maya. So even though this is a Blender course, like primarily, all of the techniques that are used are like system agnostic, so you can do the exact same things. You're just gonna have to adapt the tools, but the principles, which I'm always very, very like punctual about, it doesn't really matter which software you use, Blender, Maya, Cinema 4D, Houdini, like even you can model in freaking Unreal if you want. It doesn't really matter where you do it. The pipeline, the workflow, like the steps that you need to follow to make sure that you're doing something that's gonna be usable in game, that's the important part. So yeah, you can definitely get it. And I believe right now, if you go and check the link, you will be getting some discounts. So there are some automatic discounts inside of Udemy that you can utilize to get the course for free. Let's see who's here. Hello, Gamer Keep. Welcome, my friend. Welcome. And you subscribe. Thanks for the subscription, dude. Thank you very much. I truly appreciate it. We got 2 subs or something like that right now. Last time I think we got like 3 or 4 subs. Slowly but surely we're growing, my friends. And hopefully all of this information that I'm sharing with you is useful. My goal is to share as much as I can with you guys so that everyone can be making amazing things, amazing games, movies, commercials, like everything. There we go. Now I'm going to do something that I like to do with my assets, which is add just a little bit of surface noise, because as you can see, for instance, on all of this area right here, it's very flat. It's kind of like boring, right? And usually metal, you're going to have like a lot of damage, a lot of like changes to the metal, especially like here on the top. So I'm going to go to the clay strips. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just randomly add, and then with control, randomly remove a little bit of elements. All of this right here. There we go. There we go. A little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here. And over here, I would expect there to be a lot more damage, right? Because this is where you're actually hitting the weapon. And I'm going to use a... let's do the scrape brush again to flatten this and smooth a little bit. And what this will do, as you can see, is it will give us some interesting textures that we can have on an anvil. They're gonna make the whole thing a lot nicer. So see how like those like little changes in textures really help to sell the sort of like metallic effect? That's exactly what we're going for. Let's jump into what's the word? Let's jump into layout real quick. And we got the Vice Rector Teacher Abraham. Is the course a lot more complete than what you teach in XP? Well, I haven't taught in XP in a long time. I think I stopped teaching there like last year. So yes, my friend, if you get it, I can guarantee that your artistic level is going to go really, really, really high up. And this is going to be funny. I'm not sure if you're being taught by like Francisco or Jose, but I was their teacher. So I taught them 3D. And if you get this course, you're going to be learning directly from me, which is going to be a great addition to what they're going to be teaching you as well. So yeah, there you go. Have you tried to apply all transforms? Yeah, Burhanuddin, if the things are not looking good in VR than when they're looking in Maya, you need to check things such as the normal direction, the amount of polygons that you have, if you have the proper UVs. So there's a lot of factors that could go into that sort of stuff. So yeah. Let's go. Okay, so what I wanted to do here is I wanted to turn on the blade. Let's save, by the way. I haven't saved, so I'm going to save real quick. And I'm going to rotate the blade. Let's go to the front view. Let's rotate the blade so that it's facing down. And then let's go to the top view. Let's rotate the blade like this. Let's go to the side view. Let's rotate the blade like this. And what I want to do is I want to like embed this blade into the anvil, like to make it seem like it's actually like right there. I'm not gonna keep it symmetrical. I'm gonna like rotate a little bit so that we get like a more interesting perspective, you know, something like this. I always, whenever I'm working and I'm trying to do something like new or interesting, I always think about the final product. And this is, I think, one of the best advices that I was taught. Like, you need to understand that all of the things that we do as 3D artists is a way in which we can, like, we want to generate a reaction from our audience, right? Like, we want our players to enjoy the game. We want our film movie goers to enjoy the movie. We want the commercial to sell the product. So we need to find a way to tell a story. And one of those ways is to make sure that the composition, the elements, the camera, everything that we use is helping us tell that story. So in this case, for instance, if the axe is going to be embedded there, I need to say, like, I need to think about what kind of like shot I want to see at the end. Do I want to see a shot from the top? Do I want to see a shot from the bottom? Depending on which direction I decide to use for my shot, I'm going to be able to get a slightly different result or a different reaction from the public. Very simple thing. If I see this from the top, I'm taller than the axe, and therefore this looks like I'm going to grab the axe. If I see this from the bottom, I'm smaller than the axe, and it makes the axe look a lot more epic. So I'm going to bring in a plane, some mesh plane. Let's bring this a GNC, bring it down so that it's like there on the floor, because I do need to have like a floor. I can't go lower than the floor, otherwise the camera is not going to see it. But what I can do is I can actually go to the camera itself. So if I grab this shot cam, and I can change the focal length of the camera. So right now we're using a 35mm focal length. It's a little bit like on the medium side of things. If we go to 24mm, for instance, I'm going to be able to get closer. And as you can see, the axe is going to look very, very epic as well. Now, what's the most important thing of this shot? The axe, right? So that means that I definitely want to try to like give more attention to the axe. So even if I cut a little bit of the anvil right here, it's worth it for the what's the word, for the shot, for the like sort of cinematic thing that we want to go for. It's worth it even if we ignore a little bit of the elements. This is a very very complicated concept that some people have issues with, especially when I'm teaching things such as composition and lighting. They spend so much time modeling something, and then when I tell them, okay, it's not going to be on the shot, or it's going to be like obscured or something, they're like, oh my god, I spent so many like hours working on this element, and now we're not even gonna see it. But that's the thing, we need to make some sacrifices every now and then for the good of the shot, for the good of the render. So in this case, I think I'm gonna go for like a sort of like 3/4 side view shot, something like this. That looks really, really interesting. And we can already start thinking about like what are we going to be doing in regards to rendering. So right now I got the GPU render turned on. Let me go outside of this thing. And as you can see, there's like light information going into the scene, which looks very, very cool. I'm going to assign a very basic material to this anvil. So I'm going to assign like a dark metallic material. So dark and metallic. Roughness, I'm going to bring the roughness. It's going to be like kind of shiny, something like that. So eventually we could, of course, texture this, like do the proper workflow and everything. But this is one way to do it. So Cameron says, glad to be here. Yeah, glad you are here as well, my friends. So yeah, we got this shot right here. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the environment, and I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to say like 0.1, because I don't want there to be that much light from the environment. Now, again, let's imagine the context. Where are we? Are we in a forge? Are we in a cave? Are we in a castle? Like, where are we? I would imagine we're in a forge. Like, it makes sense to have an anvil close to the forge, right? So what we can do is we can press Shift A and add a new light. It's going to be an area light. Let's bring this area light up. I'm going to make it a lot bigger. And I'm going to imagine that the furnace, like the main place where we're melting all of the metals, it's going to be like outside of our view. So right around here. But it's going to be pointing, it's like a big door pointing towards the anvil. So something like this. And let's increase the intensity of this light to something like 4,000. There we go. So now, as you can see, we have this huge light coming from the back. If we want to add a little bit more drama to the whole thing, what we can do is we can push this to the side and then point into the back of the element, so that when we see it from the camera right here, we're gonna see a very like intense shadow on this side, and that way the molten sort of like lava effect is gonna be a lot more intense, right? Now, always, this is one of my best advices, and it's an advice that I'm giving away for free. So always add a little bit of color to your lights. White lights are very boring. They're very CG. Like, you will never find a perfectly white light in the world. It's always going to have a little bit of a tint towards the blues or towards the warm colors. Yes, there are lights that are very white, but like right now here in the studio, for instance, I used some fancy paper to change the lights that were originally white and were giving me a very flat look into this sort of like greenish tint and this sort of like yellowish warm tint. So in this case, since this is a forge, I would expect this forge to be really warm. So I'm gonna go for a really like orange color, something like there. Now that's a little bit too much, as you can see right here. So I'm gonna bring the saturation down, but we can still have this very intense effect. I think 4,000 is still a little bit too low. So I'm gonna go to 8,000, so double the amount. And now let's add a little bit more light. There's something very interesting that happens with light, and I think everyone should know about this. When you're working with light, the temperature of the light, the lower you go on the temperature side of things, it might seem like you're going colder, but you're actually going warmer. And the higher you go, you're going like brighter towards the whites and the blues. So I learned this from a physics video. I think it was like Neil deGrasse Tyson that said this. If you see a blue flame, run, because that blue flame is super hot compared to a warm or orange flame. So if you touch like a candle flame, you're gonna get burnt, of course, but it's not gonna be as dangerous as if you touch like the same size of flame, but it's blue. It's just gonna like melt your finger. So yeah, that's just a quick tip there about the light in or the temperature lights. Now, another thing that I think we could benefit from would be to, I'm gonna rotate this floor a little bit so it's more in line with the perspective. Scale it a little bit more even. There we go. So it's gonna be our background. I still think we can like turn this around. And we can do a wall. I think a wall would benefit us. So I'm gonna press Shift, actually let me go out of this thing. So I'm gonna press Shift A and I'm gonna add a new plane. I'm gonna scale the plane. Scale the plane, and I'm gonna rotate this on the y-axis 90 degrees, and then this one's gonna be here on the back. We no longer need this guy right here. Let's jump into the view. There we go. So I'm gonna scale this even bigger. It's gonna be like a long wall that we're gonna have on the background. So I'm gonna scale this on Y. There we go. And we're gonna push it back. It's gonna be really like far back. We gotta be careful here because, as you can see, we're seeing the exit of this thing. So we might need to rotate this on the Z-axis to kind of like close the wall so that we don't see as much information. There we go. So that's gonna be our backdrop sort of thing. Yeah, that looks good. Now, one of the things that I like doing is I like adding a little bit of contrast to my lights. Right now, we only have a very strong light coming from the top right. And if we go and add a secondary light to tell a story, like, yes, this is a forge, but if you're going to enter this forge, then that means that there's a door. If this is the forge itself, where all of the fire is coming from, that's fine. But there's probably going to be extra lights that are going to be bouncing around or coming in from different directions. What about if this is a forge that's in the middle of a cave or something? Well, we could do like a Shift D, move this up, rotate this so that it's pointing down into our element, and I'm going to change the light type to a spotlight so that we only get the effect right there. We can change a couple of things about the spotlight, like how narrow or how big it is. I'm going to change the radius. That's going to soften up the spotlight, as you can see there on the ground. And of course, I'm going to change the color. And in this case, to add a little bit of contrast, we're going to go for like a bluish color. So now if we take a look at this, we're going to get this very interesting like blue color going all the way over here. Now, one thing I'm saying about the forge that we have is that the size of this thing is very open. Like you can see, we're getting light pretty much everywhere. And I would like this to be a little bit more kind of like a condense. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to scale the light in. And what that will do is it will like focus the light a little bit more into our scene. So it's going to look more like a flashlight or something that's just throwing light into my element. Now, the next thing that we need to do, it's a very cool trick that we can use, is I'm going to bring in some cubes, and I'm going to use these cubes to block some of the light. So again, if you imagine that this is a forge, I would imagine that this forge has sides, right? Like sides protecting other parts of the element. So if we scale this on Y, for instance, we can add a big shadow. See that big shadow right there? Now I'm going to scale on Z. This becomes a wall. Look at that. So now I'm using this cube that's going to be outside of the frame. Like we're not even going to see the cube. It's going to be outside of the frame, but it's going to remove a lot of the light that we have on the background, on the back wall. And therefore, our like axe is going to get even more like attention, right? Like it's really going to be there as the main focus of our scene. So yeah, that's all. Let's go out here. We can do the same thing on the other side. So if we like duplicate this, as you can see, I'm gonna rotate this. We can create like, this could be like a triangular forge. And look at that. So we're creating, here in Mexico, we like to do grilling a lot. So like carne asada and stuff. And it's like you're building the little like hut where you like get your charcoal ready for your barbecue. And yeah, as you can see, even though we don't see the cube, it really changes the way we're seeing the whole scene. So it's an important element. It's kind of like a rule. And this is a tip that I got from a friend who's a magician. And he says that in magic, it's not only about what you see, but it's about what you don't see, right? So it works in a very similar fashion here. It's not only about how you get the light into the scene, it's about the things that are around the light that are going to be modifying how you're going to see the whole thing. What do you guys think so far? Let me just get some water real quick. Looking good, right? Not bad. So let's get some elements here. First, I already have a material that we can use for the floor. So to this guy right here, I'm going to go to the materials, and I have this material that's called concrete rock path. And as you can see, it gives us this very like nice, well, concrete rock path. The only thing is we need to add a little bit more divisions so that we can get the displacement. This actually already has displacement, and I've already calibrated it. It's part of the premium course, which again, it's linked there on the chat. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the modifiers, and I'm going to add a multi-resolution modifier, or actually, let's just add a subdivision modifier, subdivision surface. And the more divisions I add, as you can see, the more like effect I get on the element. I'm going to control A and apply all transforms. This is important. And again, the more of these things that I add into the viewport, the more like intense the whole thing is going to be. I'm going to apply the effects. And we can add another multi-resolution, or sorry, subdivision surface. There we go. So now we have quite a bit of polygons. And what I can do is I can go back to the shading tab. I'm going to show you how to do this, by the way, in just a second. So I'm going to go to the shading tab, and here on the displacement, I can change the scale to something like 0.5, for instance. And what's going to happen on the layout is that the displacement is going to be a lot bigger. Look at that. So we start seeing these big rocks on the effect. We're not going to see too much because, as you can see, the floor is barely visible. We can lower the camera just a tad bit. Here, I'm trying to follow what we call the rule of thirds, where you try to position the object in like one of the thirds of your element. And this is what we would be, what we would be getting. So again, we can play a little bit here. I think 0.5 is a little bit too much. You can see the stretching on the texture. So I'm going to go back to shading, and I'm going to bring this down to 0.2. There we go. So I'm going to go to layout, and this is what we get. So a nice little detail here. Ideally, like if this is a forge, ideally, I would expect there to be barrels, crates, chains, other weapons, other anvils, like a lot of stuff, right? We're not gonna have enough time right now during this stream to go over the whole thing. But we're gonna be like, that's what I would do for like a full, like more complete scene. I'll probably show you some tricks in just a second though. So now let me show you how you can do the displacement. This is a very, very common tip about Blender. So I'm gonna go to Polyhaven, And displacement is a super powerful tool that we can use to generate a very cool effect. For instance, this rock wall right there looks very good. I think this wrapped dentiste or ruins wall is probably even better because it has a lot of like texture to it. So I'm just gonna download this, and the cool thing about Polyhaven is that it's very like geared towards Blender, so they really like Blender as well, and they even have an add-on where you can like download things a lot faster, and everything is already like set up. You don't have to worry. You just connect your stuff, or you just import your element, and you're gonna have access to this exact same texture. Another thing that's great is that it's CC0 license, so it's completely free, commercial. Like you can use it for whatever thing you want. So I'm really grateful for this thing right here. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna drop the file and the texture into my folder. This is very important, and where you place things is actually going to be very important. So here I got my axe project. So the scene, the Blender scene, is going to be right there. As you can see, it's called Wrap Dentist Ruins Wall, and the texture folder is also going to be there, exactly in the same sort of like format that they had, so that when we import it into Blender, everything like gets in like correctly. So now what we're going to do here is we're going to go to File, Append, and we're going to go to that scene that we just downloaded, so the Wrap Dentiste Ruins Wall. I'm going to hit Append. I'm going to navigate to the Material section, and that's where the material is going to be, because the only thing that I want to append is the material itself. And when I do this, the material is going to be now inserted into my scene with all the proper connections. So if I grab this wall right here and I say, if I go to the materials and I add one of the existing materials, you're going to see that we're going to have the Wrap Dentiste Ruins walls right here. And look at that. We get this very cool effect. Now, of course, there's a couple of things that we need to change. Let's change them. So the first thing that I see is that the density or things are not working properly. Let's go to material preview so that we can like see how things are working a little bit better. There we go. So I'm gonna see Control A, and I'm gonna apply all transforms so that this now is like properly transformed. And the UV you can see is stretched and twisted. So I'm gonna go to UV editing. I'm gonna select this texture right here, select this face, and I'm just gonna say UV, and I'm gonna unwrap. And as you can see now, this has been unwrapped properly. However, the direction again of the element is not properly like selected. So I'm gonna select all of the elements right here, and I'm gonna rotate. Actually, do we need to rotate? Let's go to material preview. Yeah, we need to rotate. So I'm gonna have to grab this thing right here, and we're gonna rotate so that it's facing the proper direction. We're gonna go right there. Perfect. This is a tileable texture, so even if you get out of the 1-to-1 square, it's not that big of a deal. So if we go back to layout, you can see that, okay, the stones are looking a little bit better, but the scale is wrong. So the cool thing about this materials is if we go over here to the shading tab, you're gonna see that we have all of the connections that have to do with the actual material. You can see we're in the Wrap Dentiste Ruins wall. And on the mapping section, one of the things that we can do is we can change the scale. We can say like, hey, you know what? Let's go 3 by 3 by 3. And if we take a look at the shading here, that looks a lot better. Like the size of the stones makes a little bit more sense to what we have. If we want the stones to be a little bit larger, like instead of being long, being a little bit like thicker, one of the things we could do is change one of the the y-axis, for instance. And as you can see, that's going to give us a slightly different effect. And again, thanks to the fact that this is a tileable material, we can do this. With a traditional texture, we wouldn't be able to do this. It's very important that we're using tileable materials for this particular one. So once we have this, we can go back to layout, of course, and we can work with displacement. So if we go back to the render thing, you're gonna see that unfortunately this wall, even though it looks quite nice, it looks very flat. Like there's like nothing going on here, even though we do have displacement. And the reason why we are not seeing anything is because we need to add more subdivisions. So I'm gonna go to the modifiers. I'm gonna add a subdivision surface. And the more points I add to the whole subdivision surface, the more displacement I'm gonna start seeing. Right now, I'm not sure why I'm not seeing it. Like, I understand why we're seeing this. So let me get rid of this. Let's go to object mode first. And with loop cut, I'm just gonna add some cuts to the borders so that when we subdivide, we don't get like that weird distortion. And we can add like even like a couple, like on some of these views. Again, just so that when we subdivide, we don't need to subdivide that much. So we subdivide, there we go. Let's do one or twice. let's go to shading again. And here in the shading material, we should be able to check our displacement. Right now the scale is set to 0.1. Let's try 0.5. And let's see, we can even turn on rendering here so that we can see how much this is actually pushing. There we go, that's pushing a lot more. I think in this particular case, due to the size, we can really go higher. Let's try like a 3. And there we go, look at that. So now the stones are actually being pushed like very, very nicely. Again, the more resolution we add to this thing, so if we add one more division, that like the nicer and cleaner these things are gonna be. I think 3 is definitely too much. Let's keep it at 1. And look at how nice that like texture starts looking. So yeah, let's go to layout. And if we take a look at the camera, now we have this whole wall on the back that's like really, really giving us a different vibe. And the fact that the wall is dark, it's also darkening like the whole environment around our element. If we want to like fight a little bit against that and get a nicer effect, we can go to the world option and we can change the strength to something like 0.3. So this is going to bring a little bit more light into the scene. It's going to make it less dark, and that way we're going to be able to see more. But again, sometimes with this particular like scenes and stuff, seeing a little bit more is not ideal. One of the things that I don't like about this one is the fact that the floor now looks very light, very, very light. And it's a little bit weird, kind of looks like sand, right? So here's where the shading again comes really into play, because as you can see, we have the concrete path. And we got the color that's being like plugged in here into the base color. One of the things that we can do is we can press Shift A and add an RGB brightness contrast, for instance. I think brightness contrast should be fine. And if we plug it right there, we can bring the brightness down. And as you can see, that's going to darken the whole texture. So it's a very, very quick way. This is the kind of stuff, man. This is why you guys got to learn about 3D, because we can do and change so many things on the fly without having to go back and retopologize, retexture, resculpt, like nothing. You just modify this by using this shading effects right here. And we do talk about the shading things on the course as well. So again, if you want to check it out, the link's going to be here on the chat. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the render setup here. Like, look at that. Like, the difference that we get from this, like, a dark effect is way, 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 way better. Now another thing that we can add, and I actually already have this set up right here, but I'm going to show it and explain how this works from the very beginning. I want to set up something called a depth of field. Have you guys heard about that one? Let me know in the chat. It feels like this is like a monologue right now. So I'm going to go to the depth of field. And the depth of field is a very common... Games have been using it quite a bit lately. I actually heard that Final Fantasy, I haven't played it yet, but I've heard that it has a very strong depth of field, and they're probably adding a way to reduce it. So depth of field is a behavior that you can control with the lenses of cameras by modifying the aperture of the object. Or of the camera, and the bigger the aperture, the more light you're letting through, and the more blurry things that are not in focus will appear. The smaller the aperture, the sharper everything is going to be, so the light that gets in is going to be like a very precise light, and therefore you're not going to get this sort of effect. And I believe, especially when you're doing renders for like props and things like this, that's very, very cool to add a little bit of depth of field to make sure that you get an amazing result. So here, what I'm going to do is, if I go to the shot cam and I turn on depth of field, which I have right now, one of the things that I can do is I can bring the f-stop all the way down. Let's try 0.1, for instance, and you're going to see the whole scene becomes very, very blurry, right? So this is the way it works. Like, I'm gonna go to the environment. I'm just going to make the environment really bright so that we can see the depth of field. There we go. So as you can see, everything is very blurry, and we can even go like lower. We can say like 0.01, for instance, and then everything is going to be out of focus. And it's a very, I wouldn't say cheap tool, but it's a very efficient way to add a little bit more realism to your renders, because it allows you to get a very like cool result at the very end. So what I need to do here is I need to select the object, for instance, the volcano blade, and set it up as the like focus object. So it doesn't matter where I move my camera, since I use this focus object, which is going to be the volcano blade, everything that I look towards that will give me this sort of like result. Okay, so now of course the f-stop that I have right now on the camera is way too low, 0.01. It's just like, this is not even like, I don't think it's even like physically possible to have a lens with this sort of aperture. So a number that's a little bit more common, something like a 1.4. And if I do a 1.4, you can see that the axe is now perfectly in focus, and we start seeing a little bit of that effect going over here. Again, here's where you, as an artist, can make some decisions to change this and try to go and do something a little bit more interesting, right? So for instance, if we go to the f-stop and we go to, let's say, 0.4, we're gonna start seeing a little bit more of that detail here and here. We can go even lower. Let's try 0.1. And with 0.1, as you can see, like the whole wall on the back is going to be really blurry. I think 0.2 is going to be our like good number, because we do have this sort of like blurry background there, but it's not super blurry that we lose everything. And now if we go back to our lights and we bring it back to 0.2, I believe was our number, we're going to get this very interesting effect, right? So yeah, that's a really cool way to do this. I really like how this is looking so far, but I do feel like we could add some more things to make this a little bit more interesting, right? Even like this is what I was mentioning earlier, like even though we didn't texture the anvil, we didn't do retope or texture or anything, it still looks really cool. It still looks like an anvil. We can of course go to it and maybe change the color, make it a little bit lighter, so we can see a little bit more of the metal itself. But just by adding like the very basic roughness, we're already getting something that looks nice. What about volume scattering? Yes, that's the next one. Let's go with some fog, which again, it's a very simple way to do it, and it's gonna help us with a nice result. So we've all seen this sort of like volumetric fog, right? Like just mists or some smoke that gives the whole thing a little bit more of an effect. So I'm gonna press Shift A and I'm gonna create a cube. I'm gonna make this cube really big. It's gonna like pretty much encompass the whole surface right there. And I'm gonna go to shading, and I'm gonna assign a new shader to that cube. As you can see right now, if I were to go to the material, I can change the base color to like, I don't know, salmon, like pink or whatever. And this is the material that's assigned to the cube right now. But this is not what I'm gonna do. I'm actually gonna delete this thing right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to add an input, or sorry, I'm going to add an atmospheric, or it's called volume, principal volume. Always forget about the name. Volume. There we go. Principal volume. And the principal volume shader, I'm going to like plug this into the volume option of the material output. So now this cube is made out of smoke. And it's a very dense smoke. You can see it right here on the corners. It's a very dense smoke. You can see how we get this effect right here. And it's pretty much like not letting any light through. It's impossible to see what's going on because this is so dense. And it's so dense because the density here on the attributes, it's set all the way to 1. So I'm going to set this to 0.1 instead. And as you can see now, there's a lot more like volume, and we can actually see it through. We can see this light going through the object, through the smoke, and getting into our scene. If we go to the camera, you're gonna see that we get this super sexy smoke diffusion all the way over our scene. Now this is a little bit too much, so we have two options. We increase the intensity of the light so that the light is stronger and it goes through the smoke and we can see a little bit more, or we lower the smoke a little bit more. Usually I like to go for a low smoke, so I'm gonna try 0.01, which still gives us a nice effect. Maybe 0.01 is too little. Let's try 0.05 instead. There we go. So now as you can see, we get this very cool smoke. We're barely seeing the background there, like the back wall. We know it's still there, but we're barely seeing it. Let's try 0.04. And now what I can do is I can go to the spotlight right here, and let's really crank this up. Let's go double to like 16,000 watts, maybe even more. Let's go to like, I don't know, 50,000, so that we can really see this thing being diffused by the smoke. Now there's another thing that we can do here. If we grab this, like the cube, the final cube, where is it? This one right here, we can change the anisotropy, and this is going to change the effect of the light. So if we increase the anisotropy, as you can see here, I'm not letting the light through. And if I bring it the other way around, I'm actually like avoiding the top of the light but letting it on the bottom part. So you can change and again get a slightly different effect. For instance, if I increase the anisotropy here, I'm just letting the light on the top part of the effect. As you can see, this also gives us a very cool like look on the final shot. So that's the principal volume. That's one of the things that we can do here to add a little bit more, again, more like depth or oomph to the whole thing. Now, here's where I would again like ask myself, do I want to add something else? Like, do I feel like I'm missing something? And I feel like a rim light coming from this side might be a good idea. So I'm gonna press Shift A and I'm gonna add another light. It's gonna be a spotlight. I'm gonna move it here. Let's go to material preview. One of the things that I like to do, by the way, to see like both things or everything happening at the same time, is I like to do a vertical split. And on this side right here, I like to turn on my render. I actually have some skulls, so I think I can bring them. I'll look for them in just a second because I do have some. They're a little bit stylized, but we can definitely add them. Actually, they're not as stylized. I did a skull not so long ago on a tutorial that didn't air. And I think I can use that one. Yeah, let's use that one. Okay, so but let me first fix this one. So I'm gonna go here to the effect, and now here what I can do is I can see the render over here, and on this side I can start working on the actual light. Let me grab the spotlight. There we go. So I'm gonna move this, point it towards the axe. I'm having issues because of the cube, so I'm gonna turn the cube off so that we can point it. There we go, towards the X. Perfect. I'm actually gonna bring this down. It's kind of like from the lower section up, kind of like from a door or something. I'm gonna increase the radius so that's a soft light, and I'm gonna make the cone really small. Oh, so I'm gonna make the cone really small, so it's kind of like just a spotlight right there. This one, let's go to 20,000. Because when we turn on the cube, that's gonna like really bring it down. Maybe 20,000 was a little bit too much. Let's try 2,000. There we go. And I'm also gonna make this like a cool blue. Okay, I like it, but now I feel like it's like a little bit too much to the side. I want this to work like a rim light. So let me just rotate in Z. Then rotate in X. Let's rotate in C a little bit more. Like right around there. I kind of want it to hit the hilt of the element. There we go. I actually really like that. So just like a little bit of extra something there. So let's bring the power down to like 1,000. So as you can see, it just adds a little bit of extra color there, so that it's not super dark. The anvil is not super dark. And again, you can see we didn't even like added any textures to it, and it's already looking quite nice. Let me bring some models. So let me see where I got this. Well, let me save real quick. Any questions, guys, so far? I see 10 viewers over here. There should be like 10 questions going around. Feel free to chat, man, or guys. Don't be shy. There we go. Project files. There we go. File. Import. FBX. This is a sort of like realistic sculpt that I sculpted. There we go. So let me show it to you first. There we go. So this is decimated. This is not like optimized or anything, but that doesn't mean that we can't use it. So let's scale it first. Probably a little bit smaller so that it matches. This is a very important thing that you guys need to understand. Every single object that we add to a scene will bring a sense of scale to the scene itself. So if I add this skull, then what's going to happen is that we're going to have an idea of how big the axe is. So maybe before you saw the skull, you thought that this was like a double-handed sword or double-handed axe, right? For like a giant or like an orc or something. But now that we see the skull, as you can see, it looks a little bit smaller. So that means it's probably a one-handed axe. It's a very heavy one-handed axe, but it's probably going to be one-handed. We got the questions. Where do you think students can apply knowledge? Oh, I mean, like if you take the course, my friends, you're gonna be able to do pretty much any fantasy asset that you can think of. Skulls, weapons, like armor pieces, like all of these things are a way to, or you're gonna be able to apply this into that sort of stuff. As for characters, because we get that question a lot, like, are we gonna be able to do this for characters or apply? Yes, of course you can apply some of the knowledge that you learn here for characters, but we are gonna have the next course is gonna be a character course, so that's gonna be a little bit more appropriate for what we're gonna be doing. Shift D and duplicate this. It's very heavy. This is like almost 500,000 polygons for each skull, I think. Let's rotate this. Make the teeth touch the ground right there. One of the things that we definitely need is change the material. So I'm gonna go to the material. I'm gonna delete that material. I'm gonna assign a new material. It's gonna be this sort of like yellow, dark yellow, sort of like effect. It's not going to be metallic. It's going to be definitely a little bit rougher. It's probably a little bit less saturated. Again, just to get an idea. And then this one, of course, should have the exact same material. It's going to have this sort of like, again, yellowish material. There we go. I'm going to do something else in just a second that I think is going to really, really help. So let's go to the top view. Let's move this a little bit closer to the other one. Shift D. I'm going to duplicate another one right here. Rotate. And that one I'm gonna scale a little bit smaller. So we also want to have like a little bit of variation on the skull size, right? And then we can add another one. Shift D. But I'm gonna move it to the corner that's a little bit closer to the camera. So right here on the ground. And the cool thing about having it a little bit closer to the camera is that thanks to the depth of field, we're gonna get a nice like interaction as well. Let me rotate it to rotate it to the other side. There we go. Now again, this looks a little bit too big. Like it's a really huge skull. So if we don't want to mess up with the size of our scale there on our object, we definitely want to keep it a little bit simpler. There we go. Now it is like being embedded a little bit into the ground. I kind of want to make it look a little bit more natural. So it's fine if it's like slightly embedded, but I don't want it to look like it's floating, right? So if it's going to be embedded underground, let's really, really like embed it right there. Cool. So yeah, now one of the things that I'm seeing here on the composition, like in general, I really like how this is looking. But one of the things that I'm seeing is that we're still missing some more objects. I have one barrel that I'm going to be bringing in just a second. And the other thing is that the difference in roughness, like everything is very flat. Everything is very like, we're still in a very similar situation in regards to how much roughness we have on the different elements, right? So I'm going to add a plane here, mesh plane. I'm going to subdivide this plane a couple of times. Just a very simple subdivision, which is going to round the corners. It's going to look like an interesting, like a puddle. So I'm going to use this. I'm going to scale this. I'm going to bring it down so that it like interacts a little bit. See that? Like it's interacting a little bit with the actual displacement of the scene. So if I bring it over here, and let's say I bring it slightly up, G and C, you can see that the white elements are kind of like seeping through the cracks, right? And the cool thing about this is I can go here and assign a new material. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this material a glass material. So I'm going to go to, where is it? Here, transmission. And I'm going to set the transmission to 1. So now this object is going to be transmitting and it's going to look like water. I can change a couple of things. For instance, the color. I'm going to bring the color to dark, to black. And actually, I feel like it's a little bit high. Can I select it? There we go. So I'm going to press a G and C and just push it down a little bit. So I just want to have a little bit of a puddle right there. Like even something like that, it's already going to break up things very, very nicely. We can also play with the position. There we go. Something like that, I think, looks interesting. Let's change the... what else do we need to change here? I'm going to bring the roughness down. There we go. And look at that. By bringing the roughness down, now we're seeing this kind of like oil, right? So it looks like oil or blood or something. And it breaks up the uniformity that we had on the ground before it. So it allows us to get, again, some interesting effects. And the cool thing is we can grab that plane again and just go to number 7, which is top view, Shift D, and just bring it somewhere else, like right around there. We can hit G and Z to push it up again and have a slightly like different interaction on this part of the ground. So again, that gives us or allows us to have a slightly interesting effect on the image because it breaks up the effect. You can also see the reflection of the anvil, the reflection of the skulls, and it makes for a more interesting environment overall. Now let's bring the barrel in. So I'm going to say File, I'm going to import, actually I'm going to append, and I believe I have it here on the desktop. There we go, that's the barrel. So let's import the barrel and hit append. And the meshes, I'm going to have to append, I think, all of these meshes. There we go. There we go. Look at that. This barrel, by the way, if you guys want to check it out, we have the full video available in YouTube as well. So I teach you, like, again, the basics of Blender and how to create this thing. I'm going to Control J, just the barrel to make it a lot easier to manage. And now we're going to push this towards the background of the scene. Again, the barrel is an excellent way to check scale. So if I check the scale of this barrel compared to the axe, the barrel looks very small. So that means that I need to make the barrel a lot bigger, which would be like what I would expect from a normal barrel to be. And then I can push this to the back. So GNC, probably a little bit smaller. Let's go to the top view. There we go. We can, of course, duplicate this. This is a low poly object, so it shouldn't really affect our performance that much. I'm going to rotate on C to see a different side of the barrel. I'm even going to scale it a little bit. They're barely seen right there. Like those barrels right there are barely seen. So I'm going to bring one over here so that we can see a little bit of the barrel. This is, again, following one of the principles that I mentioned about sometimes you need to sacrifice certain things, and this means that you might not see the objects, but if it helps the scene, it helps. Shift D, let's bring this one here behind the skulls. Right around there. G and C. That generates a little bit. That's generating something called a tangent. So as you can see, the border of the anvil is touching the edge of the barrel. That's something that you don't want to have because it generates some weird effects. So I'm going to make this barrel a little bit bigger. Now it seems like I actually made a mistake here. There we go. Let's go back to the original position. So that's not going to have an issue now because there's not going to be any tangents. Let's just move this one. Oh my God, how many times did I duplicate this? There we go. Let's move this one right there. So we got barrel over there. It's barely seen, right? But it's giving us a nice effect. And yeah, I think that's a good option right there. Another thing we could do, let's see if it works. I could bring one more barrel and get it really close to the camera. On one of the borders right here. So Let's go Z. Let's go wireframe view so you can see where the camera is. And as you can see, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this border of the barrel to frame the whole shot. So it's going to be quite distorted because we are going to be like really far away. But as you can see, it could give an interesting framing device because again, it's like interrupting the camera shot right there. So it looks now like if we are like a mouse or something and we're watching this weapon being forged right here in the center of the scene. So it's an option. It doesn't need to be. I think I do like how it looks. It gives an interesting effect, but I'm going to just push it a little bit more so we can get. This is also doing something called planes. We're building planes in our render, and this is what you see very frequently in movies. Like if you watch any like superhero movie, you're always going to have something on the front plane, something on the middle plane, and something on the background. So or foreground, middle ground, background, and having that play of objects in the different like places, it's really good to get a nice effect. So for instance here, I'm trying to think what else, like this skull right here that we have. If we're gonna be like mouses, it might be a good idea to have it on this corner right here. See that? Oh. So it's gonna be barely off, like it's gonna be very blurry because of the depth of field. We can of course go back to the camera, shot cam, and change the depth of field a little bit because right now 0.2 is a lot, as we've mentioned before. Let's go 0.6. And now we're going to be able to see this a little bit more clearer. But again, you can imagine there were like little mouses that are seeing the little mice is the proper word. We're like little mice that are seeing this whole composition from the background. I feel like we're missing something here because we already have like interesting things everywhere else. But I feel like here we could have something interesting. Oh. What if we add chains, like chains hanging from the ceiling at different heights? That sounds interesting, right? Let's do it. Let me just drink a little bit of water because I'm becoming thirsty. So with this change things that I'm about to show you, that's another of the things that we cover quite nicely on the premium course. It's called Simplicity Out of Complexity. No, my bad. Complexity out of simplicity. That's a principle that I have been using for the past 10 years on my things, and it's this question of how can I make this a little bit more interesting without spending too much time, right? Like what can I do to just like make this a little bit more complete without spending 10, 20, 40 hours working on more models? And the answer is usually simplicity. Like if you take a look at here at my studio, you're gonna see that I got my Funkos over there, my diploma, and I got my soundproofing things. It's just simple things. Like I could model any of those things in like 10 minutes, and just by adding and creating that complexity, we can generate something that looks more interesting. So for instance, the sound like proofing that I have over here, if I model one soundproofing and I just duplicate, change colors, and rotate them around, I'm gonna have something that looks way more interesting as if I just leave the wall blank, right? So that's the same principle that we're gonna be applying here. We're gonna be using simplicity, simple objects, to generate something very cool. So here's what I'm gonna do. I am gonna I kind of want to hide a lot of stuff because it's going to be a little bit difficult to work with these things. So let me join these areas first. There we go. And let's go to solid mode. The cube here, where is it? I'm going to change the cube, call this fog cube. I know it sounds very bad, but I'm not insulting anyone. That's just the name. I'm going to go to front view and let's model on this side right here. So I'm going to press shift and right click to get my 3D cursor over here. I'm going to press shift A and I'm going to add mesh and I'm going to create a torus. I'm going to rotate the torus on the x-axis 90 degrees. And I'm going to go to component mode. I'm going to go to wireframe mode. I'm going to grab this edges right here, this guy, and I'm going to bevel those. I'm going to bevel those edges. And then I'm going to assign a new like center line on both sides of those new like bevels. Go to vertex mode, and I'm gonna grab all of the elements right here. I'm just gonna press a G and C, and as you can see with this, we've successfully created a link, like a chain link. Now usually chain links they have one side that is like forged, so they get like an extra little ridge. So I'm gonna go to my elements right here. I'm gonna add 1, and on the loop cuts, I'm gonna change this to 2. There we go. I'm gonna grab those faces. I'm gonna scale them in C a little bit. They're a little bit too big. And then with extrusion, extrude along normals, we're gonna extrude them out. We're gonna go to number 2 right here. Oh, here and here. And we're gonna bevel those. And that's it. That's gonna be my chain. Right click, shade smooth, and that's all we need. Like, we can make this a lot more like rough or not, but like just doing that it's more than enough. So here we got a couple of options in how we can do the following thing. I'm just gonna do it very, again, easy, like no modifiers, no crazy things. There's ways to randomize. We could use geometry nodes and like a lot of like more advanced stuff. I'm just gonna go to number 1. I'm gonna Shift D, push this up, and then rotate in C. So we get an interesting effect right there. There we go. And then I'm gonna grab both of them, Control J to join them. Shift D, push them up. Again, rotate in Z. Let's rotate them to the other side. And then we can grab like one of these faces, again, rotate in C. So we get a slightly like different like pattern. And then grab both of them again, Control J, G, oh, Shift D. We do that right there. Let's rotate the whole thing like back. And then we grab both elements, Control J again, Shift D. And again, rotate and C. So as you can see, by doing this, we've successfully created a big chain, right? That has like enough variation that it doesn't look as repetitive. It got this like crazy effect. I think we're still gonna have to Control J, and we're gonna scale this down. Very important. We're gonna scale this down so that it matches the proper like size that I would expect the change to have, again, compared to everything on the scene. So in this case, I think these guys need to be really, really small, roughly around there. Like that seems like a good chain size again compared to everything else. So I'm gonna like position them, let's say, like right around there. I think I still need to like give this a little bit more length because we're gonna need them to be a little bit longer. So I'm gonna Shift D again and Control J. And that's it. So by doing that, we already have our chain. It's gonna be like far enough from the camera. Let's go to the camera. There we go. And now it's just a matter of like duplicating this a couple of times, like positioning them at different depths and at different depths and at different heights. That's gonna be important. So right now, all of them are in the same height. Let's vertical split. Over here, let's go here. Let's go to top view. And I'm just gonna start like moving them into different perspectives, again, into different like depths. Some of them are gonna be really close to the camera. For instance, this one, G and C, let's push it down so that's like really close. That's gonna give us a lot more like interesting perspectives on our composition. Let's do another one like back here. Just be very careful that we're never seeing the actual like end of the chain. And that's it. Now, if we want to keep it simple, again, actually let me show you one more trick here. The hidden, hey, what's up, man? Georgie, what's up, my friend? Georgie's a good friend of ours. He's been along for the ride for a long time now. Glad you're here, my friend. We are at the very end, or approaching the end of this bonus chapter that's going to be available as well on YouTube, which is like the final render for our element right here for like a forge setup. So yeah. So now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab all of these elements. And again, just to keep it simple, actually, no, I'm going to grab one chain. I'm going to go over here and create a new material. Call this material M chain. And this is going to be metallic. It's going to be not as rough. And it's going to be, let's go for like a sort of like a blue light metal. So now let's bring our fuck cube back. Well, first, I'm going to grab all of the chains right here. Very carefully. And at the end, I'm going to grab the chain where I assigned the material. And I'm going to go to object, and I'm going to link transfer data, and I'm going to link materials. So now every single chain is inheriting the material that this one has. And if I change the material from this one, it's going to change for all of them. And yeah, if we go now to render, we're going to have some metal chains right there. There we go. As you can see, those metal chains are also really good to add that sort of like bling to the whole thing. So now not everything is like flat and matte. We actually have this very, very nice effect. And we already have the cube or the fog right there. So now it's just a matter of composition. You just grab some of these chains. And again, just to avoid having some tangents, I'm going to grab them and move them along. So for instance, this one right here, it's going straight through our axe. I don't like that. So I'm just going to move it a little bit so it's like a little bit out of frame. This one right here, it's too close to us, so I'm gonna push it up. This one I might push down so it's almost touching the ground. And as you can see, those little changes, those little links that we have are really gonna like add something else to the whole scene. It's gonna bring the whole scene together, and now it looks like it's more like a complete environment, right? So let's join areas here so that I can appreciate the render a little bit better and see what else do we want to change. I think the metal is a little bit too rough or too shiny. So I'm going to increase the roughness here a little bit on the chains so they're not as shiny. This one right here, it feels a little bit off right here, a little bit odd. So I think I'm going to delete this ones. So I'm just going to keep this one like on the background right there. Now you can see that even though the chain is straight, due to the distortion that we have by using a low focal length on the effect, that's why this thing looks like a little bit awkward. So due to that, I'm just gonna delete it, and I'll rather just like duplicate one more back here. So Shift D, and let's, oh sorry, Shift D. And let's get one right there. And that's it. Yeah. So that looks very good. What do you guys think? Did you guys like the result that we were able to get right here? Not bad, right? And remember, we have this thing set up. Oh, actually, oh my god. I just destroyed the whole like composition. Why did I do that? It's because we have animation. So let me go to the animation section right here. Don't worry, it's an easy fix. So I'm gonna delete all of the keyframes from the camera. There we go. So we go to layout. We can bring the camera back into position. So the shot was right around there. That's fine. This is sometimes I like, well, I don't like when that happens, right? Like no one likes when their work is has some issues. But the thing is, sometimes when like the software's crash or you have to do everything again, I find that gives you opportunity to see whether or not like certain things were working, and it's like another shot to make sure that like everything looks as nice as possible. So even though no one likes again that happening, it's an interesting opportunity. I think it was Bob Ross that used to say it's like happy little accidents, right? So let's go to animation, and I'm just gonna clear keyframes. There we go. So now we don't have any more keyframes. And let's go to wireframe. Let's do R right there. Let's go to the front view, R. Let's go to the right view, R. I sound like a pirate, R. There we go. Perfect. Oh, let's just. Yeah, okay. Now let's go to the camera again. And let's play a little bit with the composition. Again, rule of thirds. I'm trying to get this on one of the thirds. Try to avoid tangents. I'm gonna like either go across. Going across is also a really good way to generate more depth because objects are gonna be behind other objects, and that generates more like visual interest again. And yeah, let's see how this looks under render. And the Leech, hello, my friend. Good to see you as well. Gamer, can we also make chains with curves and infinitely long and variable chain links? Yes, that is possible. We would need to use something a little bit more advanced. Right now, the hot topic here in Blender is something called geometry nodes. So geometry nodes are kind of like programming with variables and values. So you could program a link that gets repeated along a curve, and it fits itself and it rotates randomly. So it's a little bit more complex, but it's a really cool thing that we can definitely do. Let's move the skull a little bit here. That's fine. Even if we don't see the full skull, that's fine. So yeah, that's it for the setup. So we did all the light setup, we did all the render setup with all of the elements. Again, if you take the course, you will be able to do the barrels, you will be able to do the walls, you will be able to do the chains, like all of the things that you're seeing on this scene, you should be able to do it. Even the anvil, which is again this like bonus chapter. So all of these things are one of the things that you're gonna be able to learn. Like I can guarantee you guys, if you take the course, this result that you're seeing right here, you guys will be able to do it as well. But now we're gonna go to one more thing, which is the final compositing. So compositing is the thing that we can do to add a little bit more oomph to the whole scene. So if we go to the section, you're going to see we have our final render. I'm actually, to save a little bit of resources here, I'm going to go to wireframe. There we go. So that we don't have to worry with this. Sorry if the stream lagged there a little bit. So what I'm going to do here is I already have my proportions and everything set up. I'm just going to say I think I gave this 30 seconds. So I'm going to give this a little bit more seconds. I'm going to give this 45 seconds. I'm going to say render and render. And you guys are going to have to wait with me right now until this thing finishes rendering. Sorry if there's some audio lag right now. There we go. Probably no lag. So what's happening here is Blender is doing the whole render, and it's cleaning up the image. So as you can see, all of that dusty particle effects that we have, it's now gone, and we're gonna be able to see this a lot clearer. Now, this is already telling me certain things. For instance, here on the skull, I can see that this skull is sort of floating a little bit. I don't like that, so that's something that we could change to make this a little bit better. Everything else looks really nice. I really like the contrast that we have from foreground, background, middle ground. But I want to show you a couple things that we can do to elevate this without having to waste or to invest too much time. So almost there. Sorry for the hookups there. There we go. So now, as you can see, the denoiser has kicked in as well, and we get this very, very cool effect. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to jump into compositing over here, compositing. And the way this works is we're going to use something called a viewer. So Shift A, and we're going to use a viewer. And we're going to plug our image here into the viewer. Now, you can see the image there on the background. So whatever we add here to the element will change the way our image works. I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to add a very important node that's called the glare. So the glare node will, as the name implies, gives us a glare on the things that are shining. Look at that. So in this case, we're getting this streaks glare on all of the shiny parts of the axe. Well, we're going to change this to fog glow. And fog glow, as you can see right here, will give us a very, very nice effect. If I bring the mix all the way up, that's the effect that we're getting right now. I'm going to bring it all the way back. And what I can do here is I can increase the size. So I can go for something like 30, for instance. And the glow is going to be way, way more intense. Does it stop at 9? Oh, it seems like it stops at 9. What I can also do is I can bring the threshold down. So if I bring this to 0.5, for instance, you're going to see more and more glow. If I go all the way to 0.01, everything on the scene is going to be glowing. So we're going to have glow from the forge, glow from the light, glow everywhere. That's not what we want. So 0.1 probably is going to be the way to go. There we go. And that's it. Once we have this, the only thing I need to do is I need to go to my render window. And over here, instead of seeing the render result, I'm going to look for the viewer node, which is the composite result. I'm going to say image and save this image. Let's save it on the desktop for now. Let's call this axe environment. And let's save the image. And I'm just going to do a couple of extra touches in Photoshop. Every single film you see, every single game you see, it all has post effects, post-production things. Nowadays you cannot not use them. So I'm just gonna do a very quick vignette and maybe some sparks or things, which we could also add inside the Blender, but it's gonna be a lot faster if we do it here in Photoshop. So I'm gonna open file, open. Let's open our axe environment. Look at that, looks great. Looks really, really good. So let's start with the vignette. Vignette is very easy, just a new layer. And with a soft round brush, we're just gonna paint, especially on the areas where we don't have as much light. So all of these areas like that. And we could just bring the opacity down to like, I don't know, like 25% or 50%. Some people like to change this to overlay, for instance. And as you can see, that just like darkens the effect a little bit more, which is very cool. Now, one thing I don't like, and this is of course because we didn't texture the object like properly, but you can see that the anvil doesn't have like the texture that you would expect from metal, right? So here's where you can do a little bit of cheating. Texture metal, and I can look for some like old metal textures, sort of like this guy right here. Copy this image. Oh, copy. And then over here, paste. There we go. I gotta make this a smaller. And we can overlay or screen. Overlay is usually the way to go. There we go. And then with an eraser, we can erase some of that stuff. So as you can see, we're just like very, very like softly adding a little bit of texture. This is again a hacky way to do it. This is not how I would do it. Like normally I would just like texture the object properly inside of like a Substance Painter. We actually go through Substance Painter on the course, but right now, since we're running a little bit out of time, this is a good way to do it. We can do the same thing for the bones, for instance. So if I look for bone texture, you're gonna see this sort of like this amber color. There we go, something like this. Especially on these guys right here that are like very in focus. It could really help us. It's gonna flatten the image a little bit, but it could really help. Like make it look a little bit more realistic. See that? So it's just like a little bit of texture that we're adding there to make the bones look just a tad bit realistic. Again, the proper way would be to do retopology, which we covered in the course, UVs, which we covered in the course, and texturing. Finally, I'm just gonna look for some embers. So embers texture. You can see all of this. Let's see if there's one like this one that has like a direction that's coming from like the furnace. This one's pretty cool as well. Control B. We're gonna have all of this coming from the furnace. Set this to screen so that the black colors get like eliminated, and then just like blend them in with the scene. Also, linear dodge is a really good one because it like makes everything a lot more intense. We can lower the opacity, and there we go. There we go, my friends. 2 hours. We've been working on this for a little bit over almost 2 hours, and look at how nice this result can get. Other than that, like other things that we can do, for instance, curves. We can add a little bit of like contrast here, depending on how contrasty we want things to look. We can push them right here. I personally like to add a little bit of like color correction. So let's throw in a color balance here. The shadows, I'm gonna make them a little bit cooler. And then the highlights, I'm gonna make them a little bit warmer. So as you can see, that really like changes a little bit the way that everything looks. Last but not least, I don't like using this one, but I get requests every now and then. Like if you look for film noise, like cameras will always have like this sort of like scratches and film noise, like this sort of stuff right here. Or film grain. It gets you the sort of like cinematic look as well. So for instance, this sort of thing. You can get it in here and do something like in this case, I think like a screen, and then Control L. Just play a little bit with the texture. It's just to to add, you know, a little bit of extra texture to the image. Barely noticeable, but again, it gives a nice effect. So yeah, that's it, my friends. What do you guys think? And the hidden Sarn Burhanuddin, you still there? How are you guys? How are you guys doing? Was it difficult? Was it easy? What do you guys think? Looks epic. Yeah, it looks pretty nice. I think I'm gonna desaturate this a little bit, so I'm gonna go to hue and saturation. I'm just gonna bring the saturation down a tad bit, just a tad bit. It looks pretty cool. I think for a thumbnail, this is very nice. It's probably gonna be the thumbnail for the live stream, by the way. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much it, my friends. With this, we are pretty much done with this bonus chapter. As I've been mentioning throughout the stream, this is the new course that has just been released. We're gonna get the what's the word? We're gonna get the link here on the chat in just a second in case you want to check it out. And in this course, we go over everything. It's 12 hours of content. I think like 14 hours of content where I show you how to model, sculpt, UV, texture, everything. If you want to check it out, if you want to support the channel and all of these things that we're doing, make sure to go to Udemy and get yourself a copy. We give full support as well in the Discord channel, YouTube, everywhere, and you are you're gonna be part of the team as well. So yeah, that's it. Any more questions, guys? Thank you, Andy. Thank you, my friend. Glad you liked it. Any more questions? Anything else you want to ask before we finish this stream? We're gonna have more streams next week as well. We have daily like YouTube videos and shorts. You can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. We're everywhere, every freaking where. We're trying to get everyone to know about 3D and learn as much as possible. So again, if you want to support us, following and doing all that stuff, it's gonna be a great way to do it. There we go. Well, that's it, my friends. If there's no more questions, or if you have a question, you can always jump into the Discord channel and ask me there. I'm pretty much active all time. Andy is asking, how do you like the Blender renders compared to the other render engines? I think you can get very similar results. I think Blender is a little bit faster, to be honest. I've been using it quite a bit this past couple of weeks while recording this whole course. So I really like it, to be honest. Like I'm not really sure how to say this, but I'm really falling in love with the render, with cycles especially. However, I do think Arnold gets you a slightly different texture. The things that are going to be different are how the lights behave. So for instance, one thing I don't like about Blender is that you cannot change the temperature of the lights easily. You can get a plugin and stuff like that, but it's not as like physically accurate as what you get from Arnold. However, as I've said before, it really doesn't matter which one you use. The final result is what matters. So if you can get to this final result using Blender, ZBrush, Cycles, Unreal, whatever you're using, you're going to be able to create amazing things. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Cool, my friends. Well, thank you everyone who was here during the live stream. It's been a pleasure for me to be sharing all of these techniques with you. Remember that this thing will be available in our YouTube channel in the next, I think it's going to be tomorrow or in 2 days, but it's going to be here for you, my friends, so that you can go over it, follow it along. This is again going to be like the bonus chapter of the course. If you want to see the full course, the link is right here on the chat. And that's it. Thank you, guys. I'll see you back on the next one. Bye-bye.